Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest in the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today's guest is Mona Shum, and she's founder and principal over at Industrial Hygienist at Aurora Health and Safety. Mona, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. I just wanted to say it's Aura
Founder
Health and
and
Safety.
you're a principal industrial hygienist. There we go. I said that
That's
wrong. And then
that's
the
true.
name of the company is Aura Health and Safety. Yes.
That's correct. That's correct, Adam. Thank you
Hey,
very much.
welcome. I butchered it. It was a long one. I'll be upfront and I'll be honest. You're the first principal industrial hygienist I've had on.
Yeah, probably the only one you'll have on, actually.
No, I'm in. So like just to get us started as we go through this. So we got a lot to cover. So we're going to talk about modernizing how we handle hazards in the workplace. So we got a lot to talk about here. But just to get us kicked off, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all with our Mission Matters Minute. So Mona, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's what we do. Mona, what mission matters to you?
Well, at Aura Health and Safety, our mission is actually to prevent occupational disease through a combination of education and consultation. So what I mean by that is really we're trying to make sure that everyone goes home as healthy as they came at the beginning of the day. Yeah.
So first thing first, Mona, just to get us started, what is industrial hygiene? What is industrial hygiene? What does an industrial hygienist do?
Sure, I get asked that quite often. So, industrial hygiene is actually looking at exposures in the workplace. So, we all
Mm,
know about safety, which is usually to prevent injury. So, occupational hygiene is actually the science of recognizing, evaluating, and controlling exposures in the
mm,
workplace that eventually, hopefully, prevents
mhm,
disease. So, we're looking at things that maybe have a longer timeline than like a fall or a cut or something like that in the
mhm,
safety world. So industrial hygiene really is about trying to understand what kind of hazards we have, exposure hazards we have in the workplace, whether they're chemical, or whether they're
mhm,
biological or physical, something like noise or
mm.
ergonomics, that sort of thing that can cause an injury in the future.
How did you get started in this field? Like, how were you introduced to this originally?
Well, I actually have a degree, bachelor's in microbiology and
Mhm,
immunology, and I was looking for something that I could do with that degree. And I was looking around and realized I didn't want to work in the laboratory exclusively. I didn't want to
mhm,
do that. Wasn't looking at it was kind of lonely,
mhm.
I must admit, being in a laboratory. And I had
I
worked.
had a roommate, you don't know this. You don't know this, and why would you, Mona? But I had a roommate in college who was microbiology major, and when he would tell me about his experience, and I think at some point counting something on butterfly wings, or I don't know what he was doing, I forget, but he would tell me about the days in the lab. It's for some people, but it is meticulous, I'll say. It's interesting.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and oftentimes you are by yourself. You might
Yep.
collaborate with other people, but essentially there were many long nights in my last year of my bachelor's. I was doing a thesis program, and I'd be alone until 2 a.m. in the morning, running my gels or doing whatever I was doing,
Yep.
So, anyways, I was looking for something where I could utilize science and
Hmm.
maybe have some lab work as well, but that
Hmm.
would involve going out in the world a little bit more. And so
Hmm.
I found this program sort of in a happenstance way, where I was looking around at the university of British Columbia, and
Hmm.
I was walking through this parking lot, and I saw a flyer on the wet ground because in Vancouver it's often raining. That's where I'm from, and it was wet and soggy, but I don't know what it was about it that made me want to pick it up. So I actually picked
No
it up.
way.
Yeah, and it was a soggy piece of, like, in those days it was like people had posters and pamphlets and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
They didn't have internet back then. I won't say exactly when, but anyways, they didn't have internet back then. So
Hmm.
that's how people, distributed information about programs and whatnot. And I found this program. It said occupational hygiene program. And I was really intrigued. It said, do you want to be doing, field work? Do you want to be talking to people? Do you want to also do research? And do you want to
Mm.
be, had all those things
Yeah.
that I was really intrigued about. And so I actually, in those days, I actually went to the faculty and I spoke to them. Like
Mm.
nowadays, you can't do that.
Hmm.
You email them, or you don't even
Yeah.
email them. You probably go online
Yeah.
and do it some kind of application. But in those days, I actually went to the faculty and I asked them about it. And I said, "What does this all entail? What is this all about?" And they were saying, "Well, we're trying to prevent occupational disease, and we're trying to do
Mm.
it." before it becomes a problem, so it doesn't burden our healthcare system.
Yeah.
People, so I was really into that. And I thought this really matches what I wanted to do. It brings some of that science that I really wanted to
Hmm.
have in my career, but it didn't confine me to like being
Hmm.
lonely in a lab. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying all labs are like that. I don't want to,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
for me, it was a career path that worked well.
Hmm. That's so interesting how we can have these changes in life. Like you picked up a piece of paper on the ground,
Yeah,
literally, and it took you in
exactly.
a whole nother direction. I've
Yeah.
had some people that I've interviewed that somebody asked them a question, or somebody like these little moments in time that can
Mhm.
like take us down a path that leads to other things. I love stories like that when it's a little
Yeah.
bit of just kind of almost fate, like drawing you to
Really,
it.
really
Mhm.
is. I mean, I normally don't pick up garbage, wet garbage off the ground. Like I just really, it's not a habit of
That
mine.
was
Okay.
my next question, Mona. Do you often pick up wet?
I really don't. So for me to actually
You don't
be
look like the type. I wouldn't have
no,
expected you to. Like
I,
last,
I I do think there is some kind of like serendipity, fate, whatever you might call it,
yeah.
in just doing that. Like in the
Mhm.
rain, I remember distinctly it was raining. I mean, it's
Mhm.
always raining in Vancouver in the winter
Yeah.
time, in the fall.
Yeah.
So, but I do remember that, and to this day, it's I'm just so
Hmm.
thankful that I did it. You know.
Hmm. So let's go a little bit further in the conversation. So how do you get to the point to where now you're thinking about and launching oral health and safety? Like where did that part, the entrepreneurship part of it, come in line?
Well, I think for me, like I've had a fairly long career in
Hmm.
industry and then in consulting and also in public health.
Hmm.
And then I went back into consulting at a larger firm. And I
Yeah.
think there was a bit of a downturn back in the early 2010s where the company I was in was in oil and gas. And at that time, we had a bit of a downturn with oil and gas. And there were a number of layoffs and things, layoffs that I had to actually engage in. And so I was just really rethinking my career path and where it was going to go. And
Hmm.
luckily, my husband has had his own company for 30 years, 25
Hmm.
years as well. So he had already shown me it could be done, this
Hmm.
sort of path. And then I started to think about it and I said, you know what? It would be really wonderful to be able to be in control of my own career and my own destiny. Because I
Hmm.
felt that when I was in a larger company like that, that I really wasn't. Like there's so many decisions and so many things that were totally out of my control.
Yeah.
And not that everything is in my control still. I mean, I still
Of
live in the
course.
real world.
Yeah.
But I can pick and choose, what I want to do. I can have my own mission. It's
Hmm.
mine. It's my company's. And so
Mm.
I really love that. And once I embarked upon it, it was very scary. The first time
Mhm.
it took me a while to make the decision, but I think it was sort of the last round of layoffs that sort of made me decide, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to
Mm.
just jump off the deep end and
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. And I had such great support from my husband and I also have a business partner as well who was very supportive, is very supportive. And so
Mhm.
that really helped to have that, that encouragement
Mhm.
because it is a scary endeavor. I'm sure you've talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
it's that first making that decision. But then once I made that decision, I just ran with it. And I'm a
Yeah.
very goal oriented person. So then
Mhm.
once I do set a goal, it's like then I try to achieve that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was
So what kind of problems are you helping to solve for your clients? So like talk to me a little bit more of the challenges that you're helping solve.
sure. So we look at we're trying to solve people's exposure problems. So when they
Mhm.
have, let's say they're producing something, it's a plant or it's a mine
Yeah.
or a manufacturing facility or something. Oftentimes they're producing things that they don't want to produce, right? Like in the air,
Mhm.
for instance, or
Yes.
maybe there's something that's affecting skin and things like that. They have to handle things. So we're trying to prevent people from getting sick eventually, right? So how
Mhm.
we do that is we go in and we understand what their hazards are. We look at the process. One thing I love about this career is that I learn every day. I learn about
Mm.
people's processes. I learn about people's jobs and what they do. I get to
Yeah.
talk to people and you understand. You get to
Oh
talk to
yeah.
people, right?
Oh yeah.
So I get to talk to people and interview people and go, "What do you do? How does this work?
Mhm.
How are you interacting with this chemical or this substance?" And it's really fascinating to me to sort of tease that apart. And I find
Mhm.
it like detective work. It's sort of like
Yeah.
that, we're trying to tease out these, where is that exposure coming from? How could you be exposed? And then we try to figure out how much exposure they get by actually sampling the air and we can sample
Mm.
surfaces and things like that. And you get them You get the samples analyzed by a laboratory. So that's where that kind of
Mm.
laboratory part comes in. So there's still a little bit of that laboratory work, you know,
Yeah,
that
of
we need
course.
to interact with, which is really
Yeah.
neat. And then afterwards, we get the results and we kind of compare it to whatever standards are that are available. And then
Hmm.
we say, you know, you're overexposed or you're okay. And then if they are overexposed, we come up
Hmm.
with solutions. So I
Mm.
love the problem solving as well. What
What
can we
can
do?
what can
Yeah.
some of those solutions look like? I'm curious, like what that looks like.
Oh, sure. So some of it can we like to start with this hierarchy of controls. It's like an inverted pyramid. And so what we do is like the most effective thing is to try to get rid of the chemical substitute, get, you know,
Hmm.
eliminate the hazard altogether. So if you could, let's say you're utilizing toluene, which is a chemical in the work environment. And if you could substitute with something that's a little bit less toxic, for instance, then you can actually utilize that and then you automatically start to bring down your
Mm.
exposures. But then next to elimination or substitution, then you can actually do things like ventilation where you could bring that air away
Hmm.
from these people, or you can contain that in a box. So people use lab fume hoods, for instance, to contain that toluene or that chemical, right? Inside a
Mm.
box. So that air is being drawn elsewhere. So those are sort of the engineering controls, which is the next thing. And then there's things like administrative type controls. So having like work
Mhm.
procedures around it, like safe work procedures. Maybe you have to wear gloves. Maybe you can only do it for certain periods of the day because you need
Yeah.
to make sure you don't have. And then you have sort of your last line of defense, which is your personal protective equipment. So that is like wearing a respirator and things like
Hmm.
that, where it's not the most comfortable thing. So you don't want to jump to that immediately and forego those other things up top. But that is another line of defense,
Mm.
right? So that's what we work through when we
Mm.
think about different controls that could work to reduce people's exposures. And it's also working with the workplace, because what's realistic too. So we have to
Mm.
take that into consideration, because if we suggest something and like, oh, you need to get a $3 million upgrade on your
Yeah.
ventilation system, that'll solve all your problems, and you're
Yeah.
talking to a mom and pop organization, they're going to be like, yeah, okay, yeah, see ya. Okay,
Thank
things
you.
like that,
Yeah. Thank you
right?
for that advice. Yeah.
So what can work for them, and we try to find
Hmm.
things like low hanging fruit. So what can immediately change right now
Mm.
that could prevent people from being further exposed? Can we
Yeah.
do that? And then can we figure out sort of midterm and longer term solutions for them? Like maybe they can start to upgrade their ventilation system over time. Like when
Hmm.
it starts to break down and things like that, they can do certain things to help, right?
Mm.
So we try to come up with strategies really for
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
What kind of industries are you working in?
We're really lucky. We work in a range of industries. So
Hmm.
I'd say mining is a big one that we work
Yeah.
in British Columbia and the Yukon. And then also we work at the airport and we work for clean energy, like hydroelectric energy. We also work for the film industry, which is really
Mm.
interesting because BC, I don't know if you know, but Vancouver is like the third largest sort of film and television
Hmm.
center behind Hollywood and Georgia, actually, Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
So it's really neat up here that we get to be involved in that.
Mm. Competing with Tyler Perry out there in Atlanta, right? That
Yeah.
compound they have is amazing. I seen that. I saw that documentary, Maxine's Baby. I was like, oh my! I think that's what it's called, the Tyler Perry one. I'm like, oh my gosh, if you haven't caught it, definitely should. It's amazing what they did out there. I'm like,
Wow,
wow.
yeah.
So we got Vancouver, we got Tyler Perry, we got Hollywood. I'm in. What's your vision for this company going forward, like Aura Health? Like, what's the vision for it?
I am really trying to embrace technology. The company is
Hmm.
trying to do that. And industrial hygienists are not they're not the earliest adopters, I'm going to say, of
Yeah.
a technology. So we as an industry are still using like Ethernet connections to connect our equipment to our computers, and
Hmm.
CD-ROMs. Things come on CD-ROMs. You can't even get a CD-ROM player
Hold on.
anymore.
Are you serious?
Yes, no,
You
I'm
can
pretty
still
serious.
buy CD-ROMs? I didn't even know that.
There's old equipment and they've been trying to like upgrade it, so at least it's like memory sticks and
Okay.
things like that, USB sticks, but it's essentially pretty old technology that we've been slowly improving.
Of course.
But it's a fairly small industry like compared
Hmm.
to other professions, so
Hmm.
I think there's just been slow movement. But like for me and my company, we want to start to embrace these things, like just simple things. We've been building some apps, for instance,
Mm.
to try to do exposure assessment and risk assessment out in the field more readily. So if we build
Mhm.
apps, for instance, that people could use, that you could use, Adam, you could
Mm.
download our heat stress app and you could figure out in LA right now, is it like a high risk or moderate risk of heat
Yeah.
stress? And then there's controls. Those controls are tied to what we have as regulation in British Columbia, but it'll give
Mhm.
you a good sort of idea of whether you're in the high or the low sort of
Yeah.
risk level. And so we've been trying to do more and more of that at Aura. We've been building we built a wildfire smoke app, same sort of
Mm.
thing, which tells you like, are you at high risk or moderate risk or low risk exposure to wildfire smoke? And so here it's becoming a huge issue in Canada.
Yeah.
You
And
probably
is
down
that,
in
and are
California
these
too.
apps, I know you do, of course, B2B, but are these apps kind of almost like a B2C component too? Like anybody can download them, or is this only
Anyone,
still for the businesses?
anyone
Okay.
can download them. So you could download it out
Mm.
of So if you go, it's
Yeah.
actually, we built it for a client, but our client is happy to share because they want to share with the world, which is fantastic, a wonderful philosophy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So yeah, it's IATSE 891. So if you look up that in your App Store or in your Google Play, you'll be able to find three apps. There's a heat stress app, a wildfire smoke
Yeah.
app, and a cold stress app, which you probably
Mm.
don't need in LA, but maybe the other two might be useful.
Yeah.
But essentially, what we're trying to do is put these tools, this ability to do risk assessment, into more people's hands because
Mm.
we only have a few. There's like 10,000 industrial hygienists around the world. There's just not enough of us to be at every work site to be doing
Yeah.
assessment. So if you could do assessment, if any worker could do assessment
Mm.
and sort of go to their supervisor and say, hey, you know what? Hey, there's heat stress risk here. And what are we doing about that? Just asking those
Wow.
questions. Mhm. So we're trying to do more of that. And I'm super passionate about
Mm.
that aspect of where our company's going. I want to put more stuff online. We're doing some online courses. We want to be able to like give people those tools because I teach at the University
Mhm.
of British Columbia. I'm an adjunct professor there, and I teach to 10 to 12 master's students every year, right? And
Yeah.
that's 10 to 12 people, right, that I'm teaching. Can we bring that knowledge to more people around Canada, around the
Yeah.
US, around the world, and distribute that knowledge and do it more efficiently? So I believe
Mhm.
online, is the way to go, with some in-person training perhaps too, where you have to like come in and actually do some hands-on.
Of
But
course.
essentially, if we can do that, if we can do that on a larger scale, I mean, that's so
Mhm.
exciting to me.
That is
to
exciting, and when I look at it, it's also just, and I like you coming on a program like this to educate people on what's going on and otherwise, because other than maybe some niches, people don't even know.
think,
So,
yeah,
and now
never
that you
heard of it,
have the
right?
apps coming out and different things, and as you continue to build the platform and that component of it and
Mhm.
empower others, like even just to attract others to the field too, like you're creating a whole nother ecosystem is the way I see it. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Like I was just at this International Occupational Hygiene Association conference
Mhm.
in Dublin. And my colleague and I, Elizabeth Liu from Exponent, she and I presented this work that they're doing with the Department of Defense down there. And I'm allowed to
Mm.
talk about it because we actually did speak about it at this conference.
It's okay.
So she's doing some really interesting work with wearables. So, wearable watches, chest straps,
Mm.
sweat monitors, things like that.
Yeah.
And they were doing it for the military purposes. But I was thinking, can't we use it for occupational populations? Because we have
Mhm.
the same issues. So I work with wildland firefighters. I've been doing that for several years. That's a perfect population. So we've begun to have those conversations with wildland firefighters and saying, are you interested in this type of technology to detect things like heat stress risk? Because you could do it through heart rate. That's one method of doing,
Yeah.
like looking at heat stress risk. Can we look at fatigue?
Mm.
And there are certain body battery sort of algorithms and things like that people have out there. And then can we look at dehydration and what kind of hydration needs that individual people might need?
Mm.
Because your
Mm.
needs might be different from mine, Adam. It might
Mhm.
be I sweat way more salt than you or something like that, and then I
Yeah.
need to have different electrolytes. So if we can have more individualized controls, that brings hygiene to this other level, because it used to be we just measured the air and the environment out here, and then we
Yeah.
put in like wide, general controls for everyone, same
Mm.
control for everyone, right? But
Yeah.
in this case with wearables, you can have individualized controls, which would be really
Wow.
fascinating. So I'm super excited by this aspect of embracing technology. So
Oh, that's amazing. It's fun, and it's fun to see how this is gonna all evolve, like with
yes.
wearables, apps, otherwise, from CD-ROMs to wearables. I had to bring it up. I had to bring it up. Had to do it.
So
Like, this
funny.
is interesting, and
Yeah.
when you think about things like just on the world event, like whether it's climate change or just in general, like other things that are happening, like this is in line, and I think it all kind of follows in this narrative, of safety really and what we wanna do next. Mm.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, I know that a lot of people are afraid of it because
Yeah.
it's new, right? And I think we have to go in eyes wide open. Like we have to know what the
Mhm.
limitations of these devices are and everything,
Yeah.
right? Like, but I was at the doctor yesterday. They said something about efficacy of whatever treatment they were going to
Mhm.
give me, and they said, you know what, this one treatment, it's bulletproof. It's really good. It's wonderful, but people don't do it. They don't comply, right? And if you do this other one, it may not be great for people with a severe
Yeah.
issue or anything like that, but for mild and moderate issues, this one works great because people use it. People do it, right?
Wow.
And so this is the same thing. So maybe these apps aren't as like having a hygienist come out there and actually do the heat stress
For
risk
sure.
assessment for you. Probably you get a higher quality of heat stress risk assessment. But if we
Yeah.
can put more screening ability into the
Mm.
hands of more people, you'll be
Mhm.
affecting the population at a larger level. Like I said, I only teach 10 to 12 people at a time in
Yeah.
person for a whole semester, right? And it's me taking that time and them sitting there
Mhm.
in a
Yeah.
room to
Yeah.
do this. So I can only do so much that way. But if I could do it this other way, and it can affect more people. And I'm super just passionate about that idea
Mm.
of bringing it to more people.
It's amazing. Well, Mona, this has been so much fun having you on the show today and learning more about what you're doing over at Aura Health and Safety. If somebody's watching or listening to this and they want to follow up, continue the conversation, get more info, how do they do that?
You can visit our website at www.aurahealthsafety.com, and it's
Hmm.
AURA healthsafety.com. So
Awesome. And for everybody watching or listening to this, we'll put those links in the show notes so you can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with us and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button because this is a daily show. And each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new entrepreneurs, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along in your journey as well. So, again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Mona, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And it's been a blast.
thank you very much, Adam.